Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook, the last for August, kind of the last for the unofficial summer of 2023, kind of, but it's our last one before Labor Day and Alvin's birthday, that's for sure. Let's meet the panelists and dive into the topics, starting with Wendy Wiese, co-host of the Jennifer and Wendy Show on the Big 550 KTRS. Bill McClellan, columnist with STLtoday.com and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Ray Hartmann, founder of the Riverfront Times and Donnybrook, along with Bill. And, of course, you see his column on Substack. And Mr. Alvin Reid from the St. Louis American, where he's a sports columnist and news editor. We're going to start with you, Wendy. This week, there was a fundraiser scheduled for presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy at Alvin Oak in Webster Groves, but it was announced by the restaurant because his views didn't necessarily align with theirs, and they want a balance of opinion with the people who have parties. That was the initial reason. They decided to cancel his fundraiser, where the tickets went between $500 and $3,300. Then the restaurant later said, well, we actually thought that it was a private event, and it seemed like this was a public event, and we didn't want our moniker or our logo in any of the literature that he was sending out. Once it was booked, should his fundraiser have been canceled?
Once it was booked, I don't think his fundraiser should have been canceled. If you haven't done your due diligence, then that's on you. That's just my opinion. I mean, nothing political by it. It's sad to me. I mean, I understand that the owner, the proprietor of any establishment should have the right, you know, no shoes, no shirt, no service, that kind of thing. But this is just, to me, it smacks of censorship. And that part of it makes me really uncomfortable. As I say 1,000 times a year anymore, you have a right to be wrong in this country in the eyes of other people. These are not people who, to this point, have advocated anything that is heinous or, you know, so it just, to me, it's sensitive.
Well, I disagree with you, Wendy. Like, I think that a restaurant has to serve anybody. I mean, you know, you can't say I'm not going to serve you because you're black or not going to serve you because you're Jewish. But I think the owners of a restaurant have the right to say, well, we don't want to have this official function with somebody, and that maybe they should have done more due diligence on him. But most of us, or at least people like me, hadn't really been paying attention, and I didn't know anything about him until he started talking about how 9/11, you know, let's see what the government involvement in that was and how many agents were on a plane, and global warming is a hoax and stuff like that. And I can see where a private business owner could say, hey, I don't want myself, you're welcome to come in and have dinner, but I don't want a fundraiser.
Okay, I think one, and that's a big caveat, that, all right, you'd already booked this event. But I'm one who believes that, state your case. Some clientele or some people that are at least probably familiar with my restaurant want to have this event here. I can't stand this dude. I'll probably have the place sandblasted after this is over. But as long as you're welcome in my restaurant, as long as you don't tell me that you support this person or don't support that person, but you're not welcome if you're outwardly saying, I support this person. Just open your doors to your restaurant, say like, hey, if people want to have an event here, I have a nice restaurant, I'm going to allow them to do that, because that's the American way, okay? And let's just, I don't like them, I don't believe in what they stand for, but I am not going to tell them that they cannot hold this event at my restaurant. And by the way, if it's $500 to $3,300 for a ticket, you just took money out of your employees' pockets, because I guarantee you the tips were going to be pretty good.
Okay, I wrote my Substack on it today, and I think the restaurant Olive and Oak is a terrific restaurant that did, in my opinion, the right thing. And I don't know the details. They didn't have a contract, so they didn't. There isn't any issue there. This is not a public campus where the Republicans wanted him to come on campus, and I would be in favor of letting him speak on campus. This is a commercial decision, and if the restaurant hasn't said so, if it was because patrons of this restaurant in Webster Groves were unhappy that their favorite restaurant is hosting a fundraiser, fine. It's no different than the boycott of Bud Light. I mean, you can't have a right in this country to vote with your pocketbooks. If people want to do that, and I never said people shouldn't be able to boycott Bud Light. And my
That's
point
not the
is,
question. The question is,
yes, it is.
No, we're not talking about the legal rights. We're talking about in a
talking about what's
country
right.
with civil discourse,
Yes.
like this program,
Right.
where people with opposing views in the tradition of Martin Dugan get together and they discuss issues. Should we have bakers saying, I'm not going to bake a cake for your wedding because you're gay and I don't like your behavior?
Right.
Or St. Joseph Academy said to Claire McCaskill, hey, guess what? You can't speak at your daughter's graduation because we don't like your views.
They have every right to do that.
Left Bank Books said to head...
I thought that was fine.
Yeah.
And I like Claire McCaskill, but if a private high school says, we don't like your views and we don't want you to speak here, I think that.
But that's not good for society, Bill. Because then we end up I'm not saying legally. Legally, the restaurant can do anything it wants as long as it doesn't, violate
This is a guy
the
who's
civil rights. But in terms of, Alvin is right. In terms of
don't even go
civil
into what he
discourse.
said, because it's a bunch of nutty stuff.
What is?
No, what I'm saying is, I think the argument is that regardless, okay, all right, if it's a public restaurant and all are welcome in this public restaurant, I think that the proper way to go about doing your business is just to state up front, this is not my belief, this is not what I stand for, but at the same time, I am not going to tell these people they can't do
You used to do that? Mark Cusimano at Chemo's used to do that. Mark Cusimano was conservative, but he had Jay Nixon and Dick Gephardt have fundraisers there.
We used to have to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't think, first of all, I love the fact you picked on civil discourse. This guy stood on, and I know you don't want me to be able to say it, but the fact is, he stood on the Republican debate stage and said he was the only one not bought and paid for. So he really
didn't break any laws. You said crazy things on this show. We don't ban you.
They didn't ban him. They just don't want to host his fundraiser.
That's banned. That's
no,
canceling
it is not banning him. They do not wish to host his fundraiser.
That's a cancellation.
Oh, so it's
a literal
was
cancellation.
boycotting Bud Light cancel culture?
Yes, I hated that too.
I didn't like it. I'm on the other side.
After all Anheuser-Busch has done for this country to boycott that product because one guy talked about it in one video.
It's
that was
also
ridiculous.
called free speech. I didn't like the boycott.
It's legal. I'm not denying that.
You know what I mean? My side boycotted Chick-fil-A. I mean, so what? I mean, that's what you can do. And I don't think it's a big difference between serving somebody, by the way, and hosting a fundraiser and having them put their name. And the thing that really tipped it, I think, is they wanted to publicly advertise that it was at Olive and Oak. And I mentioned Olive and Oak because I think everybody ought to go eat there.
$1 million worth of free publicity.
Well, I just want to give him some more.
And Vivek Ramaswamy is going to get more donations. I think he already has.
Oh, I don't think that's possible. I mean, he's going to get, if you're going to give to that guy.
Okay.
Good.
Bill McClellan, the mayor of St. Charles City, not county, is asking the residents to send him texts and emails with expired temporary tags and expired license plates. Of course, that's because everybody seems to be driving around now by not registering their cars and avoiding sales and property taxes and insurance and whatnot. What do you think about this?
I love it. I love the notion of citizens coming in on each other, like walking down the street and then taking a quick picture of somebody's expired plates. I guarantee you there'll be fights, if not shootings. You know, what are you doing out there? Just taking a picture.
And you think this is a good thing?
You think it's a good thing? Kids turning in their pictures.
What is it you like about this?
Something you'd have in East Berlin in 1955. It just, I like the whole idea of it, and maybe it'll work.
For all of those reasons, I don't like it because I think you're. I mean, we're kind of being tongue in cheek here, but I do think it could lead to some vigilante kind of occurrences, and that's the last thing we need.
You know, I think that there's too much violence, in parts of the city, and part of it is people are afraid. They think there'll be retribution against them, and all I could say is I wish more people would come forward with horrible things happen like that. This is just finking on your neighbor, dropping dimes, and I can't get with that.
I would like to.
That's just.
You're showing your age when you say dropping dimes.
I was going to say, you both sound like Mickey Spillane.
Yeah, I actually.
Mickey Spillane.
I really. I got to echo my fellow founding father in that he has just made such a clear-cut and articulate case against doing this. So, I mean, I don't know how to add.
Let's stop.
I don't know how to add to the case against doing this, which I share with Wendy and Alvin. But I think you said it better than any of us could.
Well, we've all seen the tags that are made out of construction paper with crayons. I mean, it's highly offensive. I just don't know if dropping dimes is the right approach.
I think we really need to move away from turning each other in, just as a
I mean, you can't shame people into getting.
But I don't know.
Well, if you want money for libraries and police and homeless shelters, then these people have to pay their taxes.
Well, okay, now, if Big Brother figured out a way to have a license plate reader on every block, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Nope. I mean, it's just right. And,
Well, of course, we get a story like that from the news. And as it turns out, Ray, the Belleville News-Democrat, which publishes a print edition 6 days a week, is now going to go to 2. You've published quite a few publications in your career. What do you say about that?
Well, of course, it's sad. I think of Gary Berkeley, our pal that was on the early days of Donnybrook. I don't know how he's doing. I hope he's well. Belleville News-Democrat's just a classic slice of Americana. Good. It's really tragic what's happening. Unfortunately, it is what it is. I mean, meaning I would be surprised, and I'm not saying it in any way snarky, that if the Post-Dispatch is coming out 7 days a week this time next year, it's just the way of the future, and the generations that are
coming.
The newer generations versus the ones that are no longer going to be with us, and some of us, it's a trend that's going to continue in terms of reading. There's nothing good about it, but it's real, and to the extent they can, they could do well online. Newspapers are so important in communities, whether it's the Belleville News-Democrat or the Post or RFT or whatever. And I hope they don't cut their staff and stuff. But
every time this has happened that I've heard of, and I know a number of people who worked on papers that shrunk, the New Orleans Times Pick. They say, well, we're cutting down to 2 days a week, but we're going to have a robust online presence. And then the first thing they do is cut staff. I mean, invariably. And I don't know how many people the Belleville News-Democrat has anymore. I remember when it was a good newspaper and, really covered the Belleville and the East Side well. I haven't seen it in a while, but it's terrible news.
Well, the transition is always painful, as the two of us have made careers in AM radio, so it doesn't maybe look the way it used to, but it's finding its way. The newspapers will always be here. I just think that we are continuing down that sort of transitional path, and it's sad, but it's inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, I can't dam this water. It's
right.
Not like,
Right.
I think you're all right. I would love it to be different. I don't know how many pages the Belleville News-Democrat would be, like on what's the slowest day now, Monday or whatever. How thin was the newspaper on that day? Could you find a way to thin another couple more and then have like 3 days instead of 2? Maybe you could find something like that. But obviously, they would be doing that if it would
the
work.
economics, trust me, the economics of that don't work. And for the longest time, daily, even almost every daily newspaper, I think including the Post, relied heavily on, and still does, on Sunday as its revenue generator, and you have to, for people
And classified.
It was
Well,
classified.
right.
And
for what-
that
well,
engine, economic
exactly.
engine, is gone forever.
And you have to
Department
understand.
All right, let's move on.
Bars,
Let's
yeah.
move on. Alvin, Reid, I want to ask you, speaking of reading material, the Department of Corrections in the state of Missouri has said that inmates will no longer be able to receive books and pamphlets and magazines from family and friends. They can still order them themselves from Amazon, for example, or barnesandnoble.com, and their family and friends can send them money for the residents of these penal institutions to do that. But because of drugs and contraband, which somehow come into the prisons through books, the books from Aunt Molly cannot be sent anymore.
Well, you know, and I don't know how bad a problem that is, but I could understand that's a problem. And boy, I really weighed this one. I was kind of, you know, 50-50, but I guess I'm America-ish now. I'm 51-49. This is a bad idea. I think family members or just people should be able to send books and magazines to people that are in prison.
I agree.
It's about education. It's always been about education. And to take any route to improving yourself even while incarcerated, I don't like that at all.
I agree. And you know, you have dogs that can sniff out drugs and machines and, you know, maybe some stuff gets through. But, you know, this is about rehabilitation.
Well, that's what
And
I was.
reading a book is a good thing to do.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is that I think of Mike Wolfe, who always says, 99% of these people are going to come out back into society. How do you want them? In other words, we have to have a sense, you know, yes, there's a component of prison, obviously, that's punishment, and nobody's suggesting it should be like, you know, a lavish environment. However, and particularly it's your point about education, we need to have the people who are in prison, the very large majority, are going to be among us.
But
and
after what
not.
happened at the Justice Center and the 73-year-old guard, and
Right.
it's just, I think it's a scary time to feel like you have to guarantee the security of the employees. And if you can get these drugs, these illicit drugs, into the hands of prisoners, I don't think that's.
Yeah, and you can still get the books, everybody. You just can't get them from family and friends.
But if you make it, if you add an inconvenience, then that would mean somebody is not going to have a book or a magazine. And I thought you were going to say you got dogs they could read. Yeah. I don't know when you said you got dogs. I'm like, what's he going to say?
Well, smart dog. Alvin, Reid, what about the murder rate in the city of St. Louis? I mean, the year is not over, so this is a partial snapshot of 2023. But at this point, this year, at the end of August, there have been 106 homicides, which is better than last year's pace when we ended the year with, let's say, 200 exactly. About this time last year, we were around 120, 130. So it's better than we were last year. What do you think?
Well, it was, as of Wednesday, the latest number was 106 as compared to 136, 22% and a little bit more of a drop. Okay. There's a lot of factors, both the police chief and, and the mayor made statements to us on it. And there's a lot of factors going into it. We had a University of Missouri St. Louis professor, I guess a criminologist, and he was on, he's in the organization that filed this latest report on some of the statistics. He said the economy has something to do with it. He said we come out of COVID, which was a bad time because everybody couldn't go any place. So there's a lot of factors. I think this is good news. I think it is proof that some of the things, you know, the entry programs into neighborhoods are working. But I cross my fingers. I mean, it's a long 4 months. But also, you know, used to have what we called long, hot summers. And it seems like we got through it. And, you know, I mean, people kill each other 365 days a year now throughout America. But I think this is good news. And I think it is, you know, worth noting achievement with 4 months left to go in the year.
I agree that we need, there's a lot of confirmation bias, as we talk about with surveys, where people want to have a certain perception, and everybody knows the perceptions right now are negative in St. Louis. And so it kind of sometimes crosses people's wires to see good news because they're so convinced it's always going to be bad. And this does, as you said, it ain't permanent. It could be, I've always thought the specific statistic of murders was greatly overrated, and I still do. But I think you have to at least hope, if you're going to hope for good news, and when it comes, at least accept that it's... Celebrate it maybe a little cautiously. But I think it's a definite good step in the right direction.
Wendy, what do you think about Bailey's Range, one of the many restaurants owned by David and Kara Bailey, deciding to close its downtown doors, I think at the end of this month, if I'm not mistaken. But it had been there for 12 years.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who works in downtown St. Louis said that it's tough to find a place to have lunch these days, even though, you know, there are 5 restaurants at Union Station, for example, and Ballpark Village is open. But, you know, Tony's has left, Chemo's left, Gito's has shut down, Panera.
Yeah. No, it is sad. And so while we cautiously are optimistic about that little sliver of good news when it comes to the murder rate, we still clearly have a lot of work to do when it comes to the perception of what's happening downtown, and the fact that something has to change pretty dramatically. I'm not sure that anybody knows what without you know, a more long-standing positive trajectory when we talk about crime numbers.
You know, I was downtown for a couple of days about a week ago, you know, going to a trial. And when they broke for lunch, I went out to get something to eat and just started walking around downtown, you know, around the Carnahan Courthouse. Couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
I thought, this is bizarre. You know, what does a conventioner do? And I happened upon Bailey's Range. It's been there a long time, but I never used to go there. I was always, you know, a Charlie Gito's person.
Right.
And I thought, well, I went into Bailey's Range, you know, a burger. I mean, it was okay, but at least it was something. And shocking news that that's gone. I mean, I don't know how you can have a convention business with people wandering around looking for a place to eat.
But I don't think we should necessarily draw a complete link between you going there and it shutting down. I don't think that. I don't think that's fair. If that's what you're saying, I think if those that would say that are being unfair to Bill.
I like shut
But
down.
no, I agree with you. I remember like places like Dooley's,
Sure.
and even as a kid going up and down Washington Avenue in the there were so many nice places, and it's. You'd like to think it's supply and demand, and there are some places on Washington Avenue west of Tucker. There are some nice places to eat still, but I think you're absolutely right that it's one of those things that supply and demand ought to provide a place, and I don't know. I guess that's what it is, and we got to figure out a way to fix that.
It's not a direct link, because a lot of years have gone by, but I'll call it an indirect link. I still think there's a Ballpark Village impact, in that, you know, if there was a time where it cost you more as an individual, like entrepreneur trying to run a restaurant, than it did there. Now, your rent or whatever your lease price was might have been less than Ballpark Village, but they were subsidized. Okay. So that maybe if you, like, hey, if you open a restaurant in downtown St. Louis, we'll find a way to, you know, get you a tax subsidy. All you have to do is be a restaurant and, you know, maybe stay open for a year. And two, and in all sincerity, I'm going to say this, y'all don't think I'm joking around. The second that we pass legalized gambling is the second that someplace opens in downtown St. Louis, and there'll be people in it all the time.
Oh, okay, well, another thing is remote
legalized gambling. There is legalized gambling downtown.
No. Sports
casino.
Sports.
How would Alvin
when McKelvey bought the old Post-Dispatch building for Square. And all of a sudden there was talk about 600 or 700 young people with, you know, good jobs are going to be right there near Washington Avenue. Everybody was excited, you know. In the bars, people would be going there after work, and none of that happened. And I guess it's people remote working or something.
That was a
big factor.
But it was a timing issue with the pandemic.
And I thought a lot of the businesses, I'm sorry, Charlie, on Washington Avenue that were just beginning to get that traction that a restaurant or, you know, any kind of little bar or whatever needs, that was when Ballpark Village opened. And so many of them were not able to.
Well, this year we've had, we were talking about the homicides in St. Louis. 6 of them have been downtown, if you include downtown West and downtown. And people hear these things, and, you know, the residents themselves have been complaining that the streets are lawless, that there aren't enough dispatchers, there aren't enough patrol cars. People hear that, and they have their experiences, and they say, hey, I'm going to stay awake. I'm going to work remotely, or I'll go somewhere else for dinner.
And not to make light of what happened, but of that 22.2% drop, I guarantee you 22.1 of it is on the north side. I feel for everybody involved. They got killed, in the downtown area. But, I don't equate the two. I'm kind of like, all right, you might be scared to go downtown or Washington Avenue. At the same time, I don't think that's why there are no restaurants.
Yeah, and I don't think we should. I know I'm very Pollyannish tonight, but I do not think we should continue to just talk about how dangerous it is. I know I'm going downtown for a concert or for a comedy show next week. I'm sorry, I'm not one of the people. I mean, people go to Blues games and Cardinal games, and yes, something can happen, just like it can anywhere in the country. Right. But we've got to stop the self-fulfilling prophecy without being, again, phony about it.
No.
We can't assume.
We have to put cops on the streets.
Well, fine, but the point is.
And dispatchers.
Then great. But at what point do you stop talking about how dangerous it is to go downtown?
Restaurants have a lot of trouble, hiring and keeping employees.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's a lot to it.
There's a lot of
at least give it a chance.
Yeah, like a lot of industries.
That's right.
It's one that's like,
On that note, we got to wrap things up and invite you to send something, including your opinion, to 9PBS. And you can do that care of 9PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Don't forget those emails, donnybrook@9pbs.org, and use X, #DonnybrookSTL. Call the 9 line, 512-9094, area code 314. And listen to us on your favorite podcast source, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, and Google Play. That's it for this edition. Thank you very much for joining us. Stay cool and have a great Labor Day. We'll see you next week.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.